Hey, what is going on, guys? Lon here from Android Authority, and back at Mobile World Congress this past February, Nokia unveiled their first three Android smartphones ever with the Nokia X, which I currently have in the house right now, the Nokia X Plus, and the Nokia XL. And this has been something that a lot of people have been clamoring for. A lot of people really wanted that Nokia look and feel, that Nokia build quality, that Nokia design, except running Android. And we finally got that at Mobile World Congress. Sort of. Let's take a closer look at the Nokia X, one of three of Nokia's first Android smartphones. Alright, so here is the Nokia X, or the box anyways, and as you can see it is a dual SIM device, so it's great for traveling, especially internationally, but since we didn't do an actual unboxing video, I figured I'd show you what came inside the box before we get into the actual device itself. But inside the box you have your typical paperwork, a micro USB charging cable, and a pair of bright red earbuds, which I totally didn't expect considering this is a rather budget device. And here is the Nokia X itself, and from a design perspective, it does exude that Nokia look and feel that we've become familiar with, and although it doesn't feel quite as premium as Nokia's high-end flagship devices, the build quality actually isn't all that bad, and it actually feels pretty solid in the hand. It is a little bit on the thick side at 10.4 millimeters, but overall it feels pretty small and compact. On the right side you've got your standard power and volume keys, which are actually pretty tactile and responsive, and then on the top you've got your 3.5mm headset jack, your micro USB port on the bottom, and on the back you've got your 3 megapixel camera and a single speaker, and then flipping around to the front you have a single back button instead of your standard array of Android buttons. The outer shell is also removable, giving you access to the two SIM card slots, the micro SD, which supports up to 32 gigs, and the 1500 mAh battery. Specs wise, the Nokia X is rocking a 4-inch display with WVGA resolution, a dual-core Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 processor inside with 512 megabytes of RAM, an Adreno 203 GPU, and 4 gigabytes of internal storage. Now obviously these are very low-end specs. You're definitely going to see pixels on this display with its low resolution. It also doesn't get very bright, and I'm sorry to say, but it's got pretty poor viewing angles as well. The performance of the Nokia X also leaves a lot to be desired, as it is rather sluggish in day-to-day usage. Scrolling can be a little janky at times, and while native applications like the dialer, messaging, and contacts open up reasonably quickly, third-party apps like Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram took several seconds to load, which over time got to be a little bit frustrating to say the least. Typing on the Nokia keyboard was also rather difficult as well, as it generally tended to lag every few keystrokes, and on a 4-inch display the keyboard felt very cramped and inaccurate, and I found myself having to type a lot slower than I normally wanted to. Web browsing performance isn't the best either, as the default browser has a hard time rendering a page, and you'll notice it quite a bit, especially if you're trying to scroll quickly to get to where you want to go. As far as gaming is concerned, I wasn't able to push the GPU to its limits because the selection of games from Nokia is rather limited, and the games that are available aren't very graphically demanding. But the games that I did play, like Fruit Ninja and Temple Run 2, it actually handled them pretty well, so if you stick to pretty basic games, you shouldn't really have any issues. And just like the rest of the phone, the camera is low end as well, coming in at only 3 megapixels, which is pretty low compared to what Nokia puts on its high-end offerings. The camera is very slow to fire, and the options from within the camera are very limited as well. There's also no tap to focus because this is a fixed focus camera, and with a 3 megapixel sensor, the pictures are pretty much exactly what you might expect them to be. There's not a whole lot of sharpness and detail, and this is very apparent if you zoom in on them even the tiniest bit. Color reproduction seems decent, but overall it's a pretty underwhelming camera, but you shouldn't really expect a whole lot from it anyways. The most frustrating part about using the Nokia X though wasn't the display, it wasn't the performance, and it wasn't the camera. It was actually the lack of integration with Google's own services, and for someone like me who uses a lot of Google's own apps, it made it rather difficult to use the Nokia X. I couldn't check my 2 Gmail accounts, I couldn't listen to Google Play Music, I couldn't use Hangouts, I couldn't watch YouTube, I couldn't even download apps off of Google Play, or do anything Google related for that instance. And even doing a quick Google search on Nokia's own app store will leave you with nothing but a bunch of third-party applications. Now this phone isn't all bad. There are some positive things that I like about it, like the battery life for example. Even with the small 1500 mAh battery, I was still able to make it through a full day just fine. I will admit that I was connected to Wi-Fi the majority of the time that I was using it, and although this phone does support 3G, it doesn't support 3G on T-Mobile's network, which is the carrier I was using it on. And because this phone doesn't have any Google services, you're not having to deal with a lot of data syncing in the background, which also helps preserve battery life as well. The most talked about aspect of Nokia's line of Android phones is probably the UI. It looks like Windows Phone and it even acts like Windows Phone, so why is it just not Windows Phone? Well, presumably it's because of the wider range of apps, and although you can't download apps from Google Play, Nokia says that virtually any Android app will work if you're willing to go through the trouble of sideloading them, which I actually did to get Instagram and Apex Launcher. There are still some elements that do remind you that this is still in fact Android, like the widgets for example, which are very familiar, and the settings menu, although slightly different, is still very much intact. Some of the features that Nokia added I actually found to be quite nice, like the double tap to wake, which we've seen on other devices like the LG G2 and the HTC One M8. So I was pleasantly surprised when I found this feature built in, and there's also glance screen, which basically shows you the clock for a short period of time if you leave your phone sitting idle. The lock screen notifications is also a really nice addition, and a simple swipe to the right will take me directly into the notification, and a swipe to the left will dismiss it entirely. And speaking of notifications, your notifications don't appear in a drop-down shade like they normally would on a typical Android device. Instead, you're using what Nokia likes to call Fastlane, which can be accessed with a right or left swipe on your main home screen. Fastlane essentially aggregates all of your notifications and any recent activity all into one. It's nice to be able to have everything you need at a single glance, but it can become cluttered rather quickly if you've opened a lot of apps or received a lot of notifications. The Nokia X is priced at 89 euros, which is roughly 120 US dollars, and is available now in emerging markets like India and Kenya. But if you're somewhere else, like say the United States for example, and you want to get your hands on the Nokia X or any of Nokia's Android offerings, you can find them on websites like eBay or even Negri Electronics for roughly 140 to 150 bucks. So there you have it guys, this has been the Nokia X. It's definitely a phone that is geared more towards emerging markets with its relatively low-end specs. And while it is being powered by Android, you'll find that the experience is very different from your typical Android device. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up down below, and also subscribe to Android Authority as well if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any future videos. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep it locked on Android Authority as we are your source for all things Android.